Hello everyone. On behalf of Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, INTAC, and the INTAC Conservation Institutes, I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, Pavitra Mudaya, and everyone who has joined us for today's talk in the Conservation Insights 2020 lecture series. I'm Dr. Padma Rohila, Director, ICI Delhi. Now to introduce our speaker, she is the Managing Trustee of the Vimore Handloom Foundation. Pavitra Mudaya's journey has allowed her to be part of many state and central government organizations promoting handlooms and design development. The India Foundation for the Arts gave her a grant to study the Molkalmuru motifs, and she was awarded a certificate of merit by the Ministry of Textiles in 1997 for revival of the same design. She was also awarded by the Ashoka Innovators for the Public, a recognition for contributing for society, for creating new avenues for the weaving communities of India through design and marketing interventions. She has been part of many committees. She was part of the Technical Advisory Committee of the Weavers Service Center, Bangalore, member of the Implementation Committee for National Center for Textile Design since its inception at the Ministry of Textiles. She was the advisory committee. She has been on the advisory committee for textiles for the government of Karnataka. She has curated handloom textiles for the India-South Africa Shared History exhibition in Johannesburg. She also addresses different groups from across the USA, Canada, the Department of South Asian Studies at the Iowa University. She's been part of the INTAC workshops, NIFT, and other design schools. She also takes out voluntary work with NGOs and with other groups to train people for livelihood support in weaving, and with NGOs concerned for working children to train young adults in weaving and vocational training. So she's done quite a bit. It's been a long journey. But today she'll be talking about conserving textiles, inspiring weavers' livelihoods. Sari conservation becomes more meaningful if, apart from conserving the original product, we could impact weavers and the continuity of the craft, and also make the textile cultural heritage available to a larger audience through reproduction of original antique design. So Pavitra will be sharing the revival journey of Vimore, which has been documenting and reviving traditional methods and designs, motifs, etc. She'll be sharing the revival of the antique puja sari design and its impact on weavers across South India for 43 years. This is a case study covering design weaving, economic growth, innovation, reinterpretation of the textile, including every aspect of the production and the growth of the consumer's acceptance. Before I invite Pavitra Mudaya, may I please request all of you to put your microphones on mute as she speaks, and we'll be taking the questions right at the end of the presentation. Please do type in the question in the chat facility. I'll be looking out for those. Also type in your name, email address, and organization name in the chat box. Pavitra, thank you so much for this talk, and you must start your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Padma, and thank you to INTAC for inviting me. Thanks a lot. Conservation, what is conservation to me? Conservation to me is to preserve a cultural legacy, both tangible and intangible. And if I ask, what is a better way to do this and to be inspired by our past, to create a sustainable support system for our weavers through our age-old system of weaving? I do not come from any academic background in either conservation or in textiles, but having worked for 45 years in the handloom space, which has become my life, this is the reason I'm able to talk to you. In 1974, my mother and me began a small home store
Pavitra, there's a problem with your connection. Hello, Pavitra, can you hear me?
From all the temples and then supply it to Vimore. Temple saris is a term we use when a devotee gives a sari for a wish fulfilled to the temples. And then when the temple has too many pieces, it's auctioned off. It's something that continues even till today. So I'm talking in 74. Luckily, we had access to all beautiful textiles that were from 74, 100 years earlier. And so that was the term how temple saris came to be called. And it came from mostly the South Indian region because our trader was buying things from the South Indian temples. They were in two varieties, in silks and cottons, and it was a huge range, and it was a great learning experience for me. So they came in bundles. So the good ones we were able to sell, and the ones with stains and marks and things like that, I would sort of uh, strengthen it, print it, embroider it. As long as we could liquidate it and have a sale, that was the only purpose. We didn't realize in the bargain we had started our small way of really conserving things, you know. We used to darn everything and do all this. I mean, we never knew of the term conservation at that time. So what happens is some of the beautiful pieces were so fabulous, but we couldn't have the luxury of retaining it. So we started painting it because color Xerox was not available and it was not viable, quite expensive. So we had to hand paint it all, which I did. And we did a small stint of 2.5 months in the Weaver Service Center because Mrs. Jaika insisted that I learn like that. So that was my only background I had in a little bit of textiles. So we couldn't really do the original because of the kind of costs involved and the kind of skills that were being lost at that time. So we would simplify the design in a simple way and be inspired by the original. So that is how our journey began. So the simple innovations were close to the original, and it sustained the weaver, the wearer, and it was conserving tradition. So this is the example I'm going to tell you about the puja sari, which is, again, I call it a rags to riches story, because it has allowed most of the weavers who have done this to move from 2 looms to 80 looms, one house to 20 houses. And it's amazing the kind of success stories and the growth it has just allowed everyone in the line, whether it was me, whether it was the weaver, or everyone around the chain. And I believe it's very important for us. So if we could do this and it impacts so many people, I think it's done its job. So something like this, what I was saying is this has been in production for 43 years, but not in the original form at that time. So you have to remember, at that time, I didn't know this, I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the knowledge, and we didn't have access to a lot of other things. So it was primarily, it was just a trial and error, and then we went along on the way, and then you learned a lot of things. And that's how weavers started coming to us, because my mother was in Kaveri, so they had a lot of faith in her. So we'd have stray weavers who'd come and say, give me something to an order. And so it was a chance to experiment slowly. And so each weaver was given some kind of a design. The puja sari, what I said was, it was amazing. We did this in a plain version. The one on your right is the original sari. So we undertook it. It was very simple. It didn't need much skill. I mean, I'm talking of in 78, the weaver still had a lot of skill to do these. So we did it in without zari because we thought it was more effective, more contemporary for a modern woman. And it went on to sell fabulously from cottage industries down to every possible place. We sold it by hundreds. And when we thought of stopping it, we said, okay, we're a small store. Where do we continue selling it? We had told the weaver, Mr. Kondana, that we are going to stop this. And then we get the bad news that he suddenly passed away. So this put us in a quandary, and we didn't know what to do. So the uncle, his brother, brought the young boy, Mr. Kondana's son, and said, see, he's only in the 9th standard. And if you stop this, how will he support the family? I mean, only running the 2 looms was the only income they had. So we decided, okay, we'll continue this, but we have to give a different twist. That's when we decided to use the Kasuti work into the puja. So what happens is the Kasuti man gained, the Dharmavaram weaver gained, and we gained. So these sort of things, small little innovations which were traditional, but which were supportive of each other's things, so everyone could go along, the silk puja in Dharmavaram was a lightweight. The other thing is this suited people's pockets because you didn't need it was not highly priced. I mean, it was in a range that most people could afford. It was something that could be home washed. And it was so it fitted into all these things and made it, that is why it was such a saleable thing, because I think you have to be aware of what you're putting out also and how many people can adapt to it, be practical, use it. And that is how this has gone on. We don't have any puja with the Kasuti work at all because we never kept any sample of what we did. Okay, so this is a picture of a plain puja. We finished the silk puja. Now we've come to the cotton. I've just given a few names of places as examples. These have been far, far more than what I can show you. And it has been taken up by weavers whom I have no contact with, who I do not know, in regions I do not know. Because we never thought of keeping a design to ourselves. Today I find it strange that things are patented, IP and things like this, but automatically we thought, we were very clear that things belong to everyone, and we never ever thought of saying it has to be only for me. Though it was my creative work, I never held on to anything like this. So in the cotton plain puja in cotton, we did it in a rough count, which in a way was practical because you didn't need to starch it and iron it. You just folded it and kept it, and you could continue to wear. So it went on for years and years. And this was at a time, I'm saying, okay, in the 80s, beginning 80s, where people never wore the thick saris. It was not fashionable. Everyone wore thinner stuff and, starched and things like this. But by doing it in a thicker count, you cut down the expenses of having to starch it, iron it, and things like that. And they were just, so it was easy to wear. A woman could go to office and continue in it the whole day and still look elegant. Those were the things. It went to Rasipuram, Salem, Chirala, and all these are regions that don't speak this. It's not, the language was not the same. So we would have some odd person from different centers, and between our drawing and talking, all these languages, we were able to communicate. Later, when we progressed, we would keep small bits of strips of the fabric and give it out to a lot of them. So this way of sort of collecting the ends of the saris and then handing it over to the weaver made sure that they did not make mistakes. And since we were a very small store, naturally they had to grow beyond us, and we never stopped it. So they were supplying everywhere all over India. And the joke of it is they would come back to me at the first of the year for my mother's signature. That was the kind of bond and relationship. We had a very close relationship with it. And I think that is the reason that I could say a lot of these people today are so successful, so successful. I'm training the second generation of their sons who are all MBA engineering boys without me knowing anything of the computer. This was a puja checked. It's been very popular by Mrs. Gandhi, Mrs. Jaika, everyone. Everyone, I think, has one like the original she wore. But the original that she is wearing is very different from what I created. Okay, the original had ikat. And years ago, we did not have much access to doing ikat in Karnataka or Tamil Nadu, where a lot of my work was. So what did I do? I substituted the border because the man said I can't do dabi. I substituted the dotted lines. And it was a major fight. The weaver says, this is not how you can weave. I said, I don't care, do it. Because I'm not so rigid that I say technically it has to be only that way. This has gone on for years and years. I mean, you've got the list of places, Kanchi, Salem, Gumadipundi, Vadamanapakam. When I call it the ripple effect, see, I've trained only few weavers across these places. But someone else says, oh, this is going very well, I'll take an order. So it has just gone. Nobody has had ownership of it. And it was only few years ago when, now during the social media thing, everyone says, what did you do, Pavi Aunty? And I said, okay, I did the body, I did the border and the pallu. So ultimately, actually, everything was my innovation. And I have customers who say this is the original. They refuse to believe that this is not the original, it's an innovation. So at a distance, when you look at it, you'll think, it looks like that, but it isn't. So what I'm saying is these sort of things, the choice between sticking to the original and creating so many livelihood opportunities, growth, and things for weavers, for all of us, I think is far superior to being so rigid about only doing the original. So, and the chain of people who benefit are not only weavers, as I said, the weavers, the consumers, the traders are very much. Okay, this is a silk sari version. Actually, this Molkalmuru Puja sari was the first version we did in Molkalmuru. I had a long association in Molkalmuru because my dad was a criminal advocate and he used to go often to Molkalmuru, and my mother and me used to tag around. So this was done in Molkalmuru, which later I took up a sort of a study on it. And if you notice, the kind of pallu was a little different. So this sold like anything, and Mr. Swami Deva is the man who did the original. Today his sons also are doing it, and I'm still in contact with all of them. They've all grown beyond me. But this was beautiful, and it took up all kinds of it. All markets sold very well. And then slowly we told them, don't do the zari, do it in thread work, because then the urban woman could wear more. So the choice of how we change things is totally up to us, to have that sensitivity, to be able to look at it, make a small change, So that is it. The second, at this point of time, I'd like to tell you there were other areas that developed in silk. So Molkalmuru was in silk in the 70s. Then we came to Arni and Kanchipuram. We made a zari pallu with the checks, all again without the ikat. Then we went on to the simpler version because the weaver said the labor, they're asking too much of labor and it's more difficult. I have weavers who don't have that much of skills. Can we do something simpler? So we did a simpler version in a place called Sevur, Cheyyar, different areas. And then one day, slowly, this two weavers come and bring up two saris, and they say, he tells me, now don't shout at me. I know you're going to grumble about it. I said, why? Because the square isn't, I mean, the puja had an absolute square, and the sari he showed me didn't have a square. So before I would shout or before I would say anything, because he told me that, I had a look at it and I said, where are you selling it? He says, I've got such a demand that the entire village is wanting to take it up. But we felt we had to tell you. I said, I mean, that's the sense of integrity that is amazing with the weavers, I mean, they could have done all this behind our backs and none of us would have known. But they came and told us, and the entire village was weaving it. And it sold across every single sari shop. So this was a lighter weight, simpler version than you'll see in the right, with no pallu. And it continued selling like anything. So this were other versions that we took. And the journey of this design took its own avatar, because every weaver, every area, every time frame, weaver will say, I can't do this, I'm adding something like this. So as I said, the choice is between creating a livelihood and allowing that to go on, as against being so finicky about every design in its totality or as the original. This went on across so many areas, so many things, and it's still going on. And if you look at the original, you'll see where everyone has deviated. The other thing I'd like to say is, somewhere along the way, we have to give them the scope for them to put their own interpretation. I can't be giving everything down in the check is this size, the pallu is this, the color is this. I always allow them to make their own contribution, because then only there's a sense of ownership. There's a sense that, okay, this is my product. That is very important for them to continue to make it their own, to sell it, and to be able to grow. Because I think it's an issue that today we give only paper painted designs and say stick only to that. After some time, there is no growth. You don't allow any kind of creative work for him. And I think that monotony is very difficult for them to handle. Just like any creative exercise, I think we need to allow that space, As long as it maintains a minimum aesthetic, I think it's fine. Yeah, because one thing we have to remember, there are different kind of markets for different kind of saris. So it's not that only the top ended piece will sell. I mean, as I've shown you in Cebu, all those kinds of varieties have gone on. Okay, so then we've come back to the ikat, like the original. This was Mr. Lakshmaya that we did in 2010. He's known my mother for years, I think for 30, 40 years, and they're very big. And so we said, no, you're not big until you achieve this, since you come from a space where you do it, can't do it. So he did this. So it was a step-by-step process. He didn't do the border, he didn't do anything, he just made the body. Then the next thing is, okay, slowly the border changes, slowly the pallu becomes. So today it's come into its total avatar as the original. And we are very proud of it. And this is the son I'm working with. And they're so big, they don't need to, but just because of contact, he continues to come to me just to give me this one sari design. So it's in that, is a creative exercise within this one thing. Look at all the options we've had across. Okay, beyond this, we had one with the Manipuri pallu also. So in this, what I want to tell you is, it's just not about one region. You have seen the original sari, but in the original, in my own possession, we have 8 varieties. So again, it reflects on that it is not only one variety. Yeah. So the second batch of it was the mass-produced puja in cotton checks. It was there in cotton, in polyester, in powerloom, in cotton silk, dupatta, yardage, stoles, and across many regions, all without Vimor. In any exhibition you go, you would surely very clearly see this design. Okay. And as I said, once the prototype is done, you don't, I mean, anyone can pick it up and do it. There is no stopping anyone. So I mean, I think of it in the larger picture. I think it's necessary. So when we did yardage again, this was Mr. Vardaraj, who was from Kanchipuram, and today his son continues to do it. See, all these people continue to go ahead and do things, you know. So when we talk of polyester, cotton silk, and dupatta, again, one guy will have a market only for dupattas, or for stoles, or for yardage, things like that. So I think uh, thing is, we have allowed, okay, whatever, we've not had a control over anything, but I'm just saying, because of the design, it has had a continuous sale. So wait for that. We don't need to go on saying this is the only way. So when in polyester, in the beginning, we were horrified when they showed us the polyester version. Slowly, it's not only about me and not my choices and not my aesthetics. As long as it sells, it puts food on the table for so many hundred people. So it's fine. So when I say rags to riches, this is it. You know, they've looked at the sari as putting food on the table. That is a very important part of what we do as work. So we give one design, and gives him that security to be able to feed his family. Once he's assured of this food security, he is able to experiment, innovate, grow, try out other things. Sometimes they're so bored that it goes on for so many years, but they say at least we don't need to bother about food and shelter for the family. And I think that is at the bottom of it, that once you're assured of this, you can't be creative on a hungry stomach. So you will start looking at things. And the other learning that has come to all of them is, over so many years, association, color, structure, texture, all that comes into play. So he will be bold, he will try out other things, he will show it to us, and he says, okay, this. So the joke of it is, he says, if you say it's okay, then I know the market will accept it. You know, it's these small little things that play a big role. I mean, we don't say that we're the bosses of everything, but somehow, you know, we say, okay, look at it, look at what is the variation you could do. So we've had all kinds of variations in this range. I'd like to show you a small little clip we did in the puja sari. Just look at it. Okay, so I want to tell you about my experiences. Can you hear me now, Padma? Padma, can you hear me?
Yes, Pavitra, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I want to just talk about my experiences of conserving textiles. So I've always already told you about the temple that auctioned off the saris and was supplied. We had a great deal of support from Pupul Jaikar and Kamala Devi, who were really so appreciative and supportive of what we were doing, because at that point of time it was not lucrative to do revival saris or these old temple saris, because that time the space was about synthetics, imported textiles and things like that. So when we took the reproduction of the original, they were there all the time supporting us. Doing the painting was of the original was a first step in conserving design. This piece that you're looking at is a headscarf that I belong to the Kodwa community. So we have a headscarf, and this was designed by my grandmother in Benares and sent to Kodagu in the south in Karnataka. So these are the kind of things, and it's very interesting to see why it was what was special about this. This was very area specific, community specific, because nobody else wears the head kerchief like the way we do. And the center round medallion comes at the top of the head. If you look at the bird is very South Indian, like what we call our hamsas. Okay, and the border design is totally Banaras. So these are kind of things about how they've innovated for a specific community. And it must be more than 100 plus years, and it's still going strong. Okay, what is the criteria that I do to undertake the revival? In this picture, I don't know if you could notice which is the original and which is the reproduction. Both are in the photograph. The extreme right is the original and the left is the new piece. So what happens is, I believe this is again done from an old customer's piece. They gave us their mother's sari and we recreated it. So I believe that our Indian textile is everyone's legacy. So then why shouldn't we make an attempt to allow more number of people to possess it, more number of weavers to get work? I mean, this is an industry that doesn't destroy anything. You can work from home and all the plus points of the sustainable goals it has. So I believe that any sari that comes to me, everyone brings me their grandmother's sari and I've never refused it. It becomes a great education for me because sometimes it's in tatters. When it's in tatters, it gives you a chance to study the kind of construction, the kind of silk, the kind of zari, how they've twisted it, what is happening. In a layman's language, I understand it. And this is what we sort of guide the weavers to be able to do it. So like we had one sari that had a 5-ply. The weaver could never say 5-ply. And he insisted on calling it a firefly. So, okay, to humor him, the name continues. But most of these old textiles, of course, this is a Banaras, but most of the textiles, we were not able to figure out which region it was. And one thing we have to understand is 100 years ago, the techniques were a little different. So how do I simplify it, make it cost effective, make it something that can have a longer production, benefiting everyone and going along. So as near a possible thing can come across, as you see in this photograph. Last year, we set up this Wimore Museum of Living Textiles. And this was primarily, I realized this is about common man's textiles. I was very clear because I was never a collector. Though we did have temple saris when we began our business, we didn't have the luxury of really keeping too many. But along the time, everyone started giving us and donating their old pieces to us. So it became a great study for me. So in the museum, I said, why is it that we're only showcasing royalty and period textiles? I mean, we had to celebrate that a common person like me, we've also wanted aesthetic, beautiful things. And that has driven the weaver to create beautiful things. He used the loom as his canvas and created things of beauty. I mean, without any kind of patronage or royalty or anything. Why I say this is, in some small village, you can see so many varieties of a same design. So I thought it was very important for us to understand what drove some designs that were a common man's need at all. The other thing I always show in the museum is to show them the assimilation and integration is India's strength. Because it is, if you see regions of, I've shown you the Puja sari with the Manipuri motif. Now, how did we integrate both those areas? They're two different regions. But again, with trade, migrations, it came along. And then the trader would have said this is what he saw. And the Manipuri pallu came to being in a South Indian sari. Similarly, there's no sense of ownership. The Manipuri person didn't own that sari, neither the Tamil Nadu guy could say this is totally my design. So what happened, it has allowed so many people to flourish across, and I think this integration and assimilation, as long as it creates an aesthetic piece, is very, very valid and necessary. And in the museum, I always make it a point to ask people, look at it, where do you find the commonalities? Celebrate your commonalities instead of your differences. And people are surprised to see, oh, this looks the same, that looks the same. And it is. Only thing, if you try and study it, there are a lot of similarities in every region. So what we do is, it's also written in a very non-technical place, because as I said, the idea is I want it as an inspiration place for the common person and for the weaver. So I don't want to get into something very technical of what is the very technical language. I want it for people to understand, enjoy, and make it their own. The whole experience should be about something that you can relate to. So this also has some looms. We've got a couple of looms, a big loom and a small loom. So the weaver sometimes sees this, he's inspired, and he can try experiment it on a small baby loom or the big loom. And we have discussions on why is it this technique, could it be like this? He will tell me no, it could be. So we always say try it here, and then go back home and try what you have in your head and come back to us. So this is something very valuable. It's not like you just say, oh wow, it's a beautiful piece, it belongs somewhere, and you go off. I want it to be, why do you want to take it? Inspire yourself, whether it's embroidery or weaving. As long as it touches you in that way, I think it's important. We also conduct urban weavers workshops to spread the joy of hand weaving. We have small looms, and people can learn to make a small little stole. You have a master weaver who's able to guide you. That, I think, when you practice, when you try it out with your own hands, it's amazing. And anything done with the hand, heart, and head is always therapeutic. It gives you great joy, as we've seen with all our crafts and textiles, which are centuries old. So the small picture of the museum, this is. So we write about every little thing, and we've got a loom, small little write-ups. We've got one space where we say, tell us more. There are a lot of textiles that I don't know about. So every visitor says, oh, I think something is like this. So it becomes interesting. It becomes everyone's journey, where everyone contributes to some sense of knowledge. And knowledge sharing is the most beautiful thing, because things that I wouldn't know, or most of us don't know, somewhere some old lady would have heard some story and comes and tells us. And I think it's good, because that's how you gather knowledge, especially in the small space. Big question is, how do we authenticate origin in the absence of records? See, historical textiles are all documented, written about, or things like that. Simple, ordinary designs that are not documented. Now, how do we say this belongs to a place? This is a big issue that I have, and everyone says it's not like that. So in the absence of any written document, I find it very difficult to ascertain it. So this piece is very beautiful. It has a car, a biplane, and a gramophone. So when I showed it to my Banaras weaver, and I thought it was Banaras, and he says, absolutely not. It's not there. See, they are masters at it. They know to study the texture, the yarns, and the construction. And he says it's not that. So now, where did it come from? There has been so much of loss, and that is our tragedy. I mean, all of India, we were weaving all across different areas, and we are not able to identify which place it is. So that is very important. But it is a great fun thing to read and look at it, because I suppose we like to think, okay, the weaver has seen it somewhere, the biplane and the cars. He's come back and used the loom as his medium and woven it. And it's a great study for any student of textiles or anyone else, because in just this one car, you can see how he's varied the different kind of the binding just to get different aspects of the car. You have a flagpole, the steering wheel, and every little detail. So this is a kind of, the sari was just not only to wear, it was a form of communication. And the handloom was. So he's communicated what he's seen, he can communicate what he imagines. And I think that is that is what weaving does. Now, textiles, the range of people. So people in the village wouldn't know what a biplane was or what a car looked like long ago at that time when the biplane came. So obviously this, shared it with his local people, and that's how they have gained knowledge. We use these kind of saris and to tell storytelling for children, which is very interesting because we put it across to them and children come out with such interesting stories, on where a person goes. So we say, we build up a little story, and then we ask the kids to build up a second story. So it's come out very interesting. When we recreated this, the car, the weaver was weaving, and he begged us after 8 saris. He said, I'm just not weaving the sari. And when we asked him why, he said that all the children, keep opening the window in the street to his house and keep making fun of him, saying, oh, you're weaving a car aeroplane. They make so much of fun of him. He says, I can't take the taunts and the teasing anymore. I'm not weaving it. So these are the little kind of things, So how was it? Where was it? It's still a mystery. So till we figure all that out, why not save the design? So we've done all this. So why do we need to also preserve design? It's very important. Now you look at this exotic piece, okay? For me, it becomes a study to look at the back of it and understand what, why, what could be done, where could we make a change. So first thing is, I think it's necessary to preserve is because it's our common heritage, it's our inheritance. Earlier, royalty played a big role by supporting all these exotic textiles. But now when there is an absence of royalty, I think the community becomes the patron. Okay. And who are the custodians? The weavers are the custodians of all these textiles. So today, when you say, I did that, I did this, I can only do a reinterpretation of it. But I cannot have an ownership of it because it wasn't only what I created. So this is what we say, that it's because of my guidance and aesthetics, I've been able to have a fair amount of success between the original and the reproduction. So I don't know whether saying this, creating today's pieces becomes tomorrow's antiques. Every piece you see is 150 years, all above old ones. So in what we have among us is, my collection is only between 100 and 120 years. And even when we do documentation, those are the things that weavers could recall, the old people. So it's important that we move on, and change is the only constant. I think it's important that society needs to include the creative interpretation of textiles, which also allows growth. So first, the textiles that we see was done only for the local community. Then it was given for traders to expand and move. And that's how it's gone across. The traders have taken it, migrations all across the country, and that's how it's traveled. There are many multiple variations. So I say it's not a work of one artisan, because in one village, you will see so many variations of the same thing. Weaving being a creative thing, you don't have to say this is the only way. And there were other external factors like climate, social norm, and festivities that influence the design development. The oral history plays a very important part of what I do, because, when looking at the design, like if it's a necklace pattern, or if it's the gramophone, or if it was some other particular motive, you realize that along that time, most of the saris had those kind of a motive. So maybe it was a trend or a fashion or whatever. So what do we do? By recreating the original in design, we are safeguarding and creating antiques for tomorrow. Because the question of having these antiques is not only to see, but it is to wear and make it a living craft. So that is very important, because very often when we go into museums, we say, wow, how beautiful, I wish I had one. So it's possible to make that wish come true because we have such fabulous weavers, and we have such a great textile legacy. So when I talk about this, see that in this border, you could see a kind of a variation. We've seen it right. It's on the left side. It's a Banaras sari, again, donated to us. It is from 1939, family heirloom. We've got a lot of these kind of designs, which we call chain design. In Tamil also, they say like a necklace design, I mean, the peaks on the top of it. And it's very interesting to see even the kind of the influences. The cornucopia is not a mango. It's a bouquet of flowers. Now, where do we have, I mean, we don't know historically if we've ever had giving a bouquet of flowers as part of our Indian systems. So how is it been adapted? It must have been an English or a French custom of giving a bouquet of flowers. The weaver is so brilliant, and he's adapted it here. On the right, there is a thing that it's called a chala. It's a cummerband. Okay, the Kurgs use it it's a cummerband used over a black cloak in Kurg. Kurg didn't have any weaving, and so all the designs were sent to Banaras to be done. These are small things, about hardly 12 or 13 inches, like the cummerband that you would see even that royalty uses. So it was very interesting for me to recreate this, because the system today is, I mean, how they make those little buttas is different from what we do in the south, to where in Benares we did a different version of it, but it came out very beautiful. So the challenge is to take an old textile, see what you could do with it, and put it out so more people could own it. Okay, the things, we have a lot of youngsters and design students, a lot of people who come, look at the museum, take notes, look at the different designs, motives, meanings. So what happens is, I mean, it becomes a learning, it becomes an exploration, because these young minds have such fabulous ways of going ahead. Anything can inspire them. Okay. On the left side, we have the Ganda Beranda. So by showing them textiles, talking to them, they will give me new ways of how they would look at it. And this was a group from the Shrishti school. It was amazing. The Ganda Beranda is an old design that is the Karnataka emblem, but it is there throughout from Taxila to Vijayanagar. These are the last slides I want to show you. How it was not just about India, how we've adapted and assimilated from all over the world. So this is, you could see, it's an Arabic, I mean, somewhere southeast, Saudi area kind of a thing, Gulf sari. It's got a minaret, it's got the Islamic building, it's got a dove in the water, it's got date palms. It's fabulous that I don't know how this man has made this picture. But what is interesting, on the top you'll find a pot of those flowers and pot. That is very typical of India. So how he's assimilated both these things, I think it's beautiful. And when I had gone to Doha, I took it. They were amazed that, see, so many years ago, an Indian craftsman has seen it and woven it. And this was donated to me. It was a wedding sari of a lady who gave me Jayanti. It was her mother's sari. Again, it's interesting that times, if she is 80 plus, 89 years, the sari was not in red. See, today we only know that most brides wear only red saris, and that too in the south. This was a green sari. That was interesting. The slide on the right again is a bouquet of flowers. I was fascinated because the border was a lot of study, and it interesting enough because a bouquet of flowers continued to be used in all the Konya area. I mean, in all the corner designs, This is the last slide I'd like to talk about. This was a sampler, and it was done by my grandmother in 1909. Okay, and when Kamala Devi used to ask me, there must be some craft in Cook, I said, no. And I used to think, God, she asked so many questions of me, and I do not know all this. But later, looking at this, and I've shown it to a couple of people, it's fine cross-stitch embroidery, and it's far, far superior to Kasuti. So we have a Kasuti man who's tried, he says, let's try it. And he says he's just given up, it's impossible. I've tried converting it into a graph and just given up. So it's interesting. So I have used this as an inspiration to create designs in weaves. But this is in 1909. And it was a learning sampler, ABCD, and the numbers put into that. So we don't know about anything. There are just 3-4 samples that are known in Coorg. Most people, Kodwas, do not know that this was part of the system. So all I can say, I'd like to close is conserve and preserve heritage as a thanksgiving for all that our culture has given to us. Thank you, Intac, and thanks a lot for this opportunity to be able to share my work. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavitra. That was a very interesting talk.
Thank you.
The video didn't play out, I think, because of the poor internet connection from either side.
I don't know.
But I think it was very well. So any questions? Anyone would like to comment? Tanika said that the piece with the motor car and the gramophone looked like a baluchari. Was there any reference? Did you try the baluchari?
No, the baluchari silk is much thinner. This is a thicker silk. The silk is much thicker, so that's why the Banaras and I don't think it is balucha, because the silk is much thicker and it is untwisted. Baluchari didn't have this kind of a thick silk. So I don't know, looking at the silk, it could be the Maharashtra Andhra area, but we're not able to figure this out at all, because I said, it could be that region, because I've got a lot of textiles in the Maharashtra Andhra area. Some of them are very thick like this. Structure could be, but design we do not know. So definitely not Baluchar at all.
So no questions, Pavitra. No questions. I don't know, I think it's a good thing. So any questions, anyone? Any comments, anything you would like to add on?
Say more about color.
There's one question. She said, I've noticed that most of the sarees had a red color. Mm-hmm. I noticed have a red ground. Any particular reason for using red?
No, the thing is, see, as I said, most of these textiles are not very old. Okay, so most of them are all chemical colors. It's not vegetable dyed colors. Some of them are vegetable dyed. There are not very many in our collection that are vegetable dyed, because it's not very ancient as such. So that's why most of them are chemical dyes as such. It's not like old. There are 2 things in our collection, and very interesting to talk about vegetable dyes. We had something in the outskirts of Bangalore, and in Karnataka they used indigo, and we never knew indigo was there in Karnataka, in Bangalore especially. So they used to get the indigo cakes from Raichur in North Karnataka and get it down and then weave it. And he was so disillusioned. He got a national award in the 50s. And he said, it's not paying me anything. So he didn't teach the children how to do the whole sari. They've given me a sample of it. I've had a lot of goodwill. So I have a sample with the indigo and the turmeric dyeing. So these systems were there. It was also called a Kagina Sire. They did have indigo and black, and this. Interestingly, they put a lot of importance to black because it was the vehicle of the Shani god was a crow, and that was black. So black was used to ward off Shani. And interestingly, on Saturday, people who worked in the fields wore it because they believed that they could save themselves from god Shani. So I found this across quite a few regions. That was the only vegetable dye I have seen in a lot of saris. Even the puja old ones are not really vegetables. We've got only one puja that is a vegetable dye. The other thing that I do have of a vegetable dye is something called the Simhasana and the Nanjapa. I don't have the slide here. It was taken for the Festival of India. Mr. Martan Singh took it. That had vegetable dyed. Okay, and I didn't know, at that time when we did the festival, we didn't know it was from India. From anywhere else out. Subsequently, a Cambodian person told me it is from a Cambodian textile. And when we did look at it, it is there. It's one of my best-selling designs that I've done. And it is just beautiful. The amazing thing is when I came back home and I looked, we had 2 sarongs that had, and anyone who's traveled to the Southeast Asia will find that kind of a design. It is there in a sari. We've done it in a sari. So there has been, and if you look at trade, it has been there, Southeast Asia, Tamil Nadu, there has been a trail there and it is from there. Beyond about 4 saris that are vegetable dyed, I don't know. And see, I didn't start getting into vegetable dyed because I had no knowledge about it. So the idea was, how do we preserve it in a way that we knew?
So, no, but is there a reason for red color? Or is it just why red in most of the saris? Is there?
I don't know. The puja, it is only red. So when I was talking to all these old people there, they said it is auspicious. You know, they said the red color was auspicious, and that is why every puja was done only in red. There was no other color across, and some of them were vegetable dyed. And in certain areas, they had a seed called kirimanji. See, since I didn't come from an academic background, I really did not know. When I asked what is the seed, what is it, they would just say these names. At that point of time, I didn't think that I should take it to a lab and check it. Now I know better. Now I should do that. But that is it. And the interesting is the red runs, but it doesn't come onto the white.
Okay.
You know, even now the color runs, but it doesn't go over the white color. It's a fact. It's a beautiful things, and these are what the tragedy is, that we've lost a lot of these little indigenous knowledge. You know, because so the only way I would do it is through oral history and talk to these people and sort of reconnect it.
Thank you. Any 9-yard saris in your collection in the museum? People are interested.
Yeah, 9 yards. What would happen is, from Maharashtra, of course, we got a lot of 9 yards. Okay. But by the time it came to us, there were a lot of 9 yards in the Maharashtra area. We got from Pythanese down to everything was in 9 yards. The style of wearing was 9 yards. Some of it was cut or attached, reattached. But 9 yards came mainly from Maharashtra and a certain part of Tamil Nadu, where they use the 9 yard sari. We do have samples, the Kurapod, where they called it. Those were all 9 yards. You know, those are wedding saris, and we do have that as 9 yards, but continuous.
Okay, then an observation, a very interesting observation from Monisha. She's saying the last slide with 5 cross-stitch sample is very similar to embroidery from Palestine, Jordan area. Even the motifs look similar.
Exactly. In fact, Jasleen told us that, you know, because we showed me a photo of a curtain, Jasleen Dameja. So there's a Greek from Crete. There was a curtain fabric that had these kind of things, and in only 2 colors, red and white, and things. And that's what is strange about it. You know, I mean, there's a global appeal to any of the designs. And Monisha's right. The thing is, we've not gone deep into it, but when we try and study it, I mean, it's fabulous. And I would love anyone to give me details on this, you know, because there are just 3 samples left among my community. So we do not know it, you know.
Oh, thank you. Do you know when textiles started in India? If you could throw some light on it.
I think you all at Intact would be a better judge. See, because I mean, as I said, I wouldn't be able to tell you a period. I'm not an academic person as such. So, but the thing is, everyone, like the Molkal Moro, there is a beautiful design that was done. No one in that village ever knew that design existed till a 90-year-old man told me, I'm going to show you something. That was on my second visit. He thought, okay, I'm serious. And slowly these old people show me things. That's when you're able to figure out, okay, could this be? Now, we never associate this Meenakari with with the Karnataka. But Meenakari was very prevalent even in Bangalore, in the old textiles. So, you know, those kind of things, it's only the kind of technique that gives away. We don't know the period as such. It's, I mean, we've not, that is the sad thing about it.
So, and so then again, Ritvika wants to know, was it a struggle uphill in face of all mill-produced synthetic textiles that were being produced, if you could share about the difficulties you faced, and if there were any government initiatives helping you in this.
Yeah, the thing is, it was difficult, but I think there was so much joy in it. As I said, we started this out of difficulty. We started it out of necessity. And it wasn't lucrative at that time because polyester mill-made stuff was rampant there, and everyone fashionable wore synthetic things. There, I mean, I don't want to talk about the difficult. It is difficult to be able to sell what was handloom, but I think that sensibilities of the aesthetics drives that sale. Say, even irrespective of it being handloom, people bought. But touch wood, we wouldn't have finished so many years with no advertisement. People bought. Cottage industries just continued buying. Anything aesthetic sells. There are a lot of difficulties, but I think instinctively we all have the capacity to enjoy anything aesthetic. As I always believe, if you can enjoy and see nature, the sensibilities and beauty and things like that come through. So any aesthetic thing will definitely sell. I think the biggest part of any kind of a problem was, I think you have to have empathy and integrity. That is very crucial. Once you have that and you have this thing in place, so if you're able to empathize and not work from a point of poor weaver, you have to treat him as a skilled person who has so much of knowledge. I think success really does come to you, because today we have 80% of my weavers who've grown from weaver to entrepreneur. They have shops of their own. They're huge. They supply all of India. And this is a thing that the government says, oh, you're just an accident. It is, how did you have so much success? I have just one home store, but I can say 80% are so big, it's not funny. So all I say is empathy necessary, but aesthetic in design is very crucial. That is important.
Pavitra, is it okay if I share your email ID with people who want to contact you with your permission?
Sure. Definitely. Thank you.
So everyone, Pavitra Mutayar, email ID is vimorhandloomfoundation@gmail.com. So please do write to her in case you have any specific query. So again, Monisha has said,
Yeah,
Private Collection Museum in Amman, Jordan. So
I'd love to connect with Monisha and I'll speak to her, get her. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I've typed in the email ID for everyone to see. It's vimorhandloomfoundation@gmail.com. So any questions? Mitra, the video will not work. I mean, everybody's saying what happened to the video.
So sorry, just give me 1 minute.
If you could
just 1 minute. Yeah, just 1 minute. Yeah, quickly. Yeah. Quickly, just 1 minute.
Yeah. Also, if you could speak what is happening in the background, maybe we'll understand that.
Now just put it back. Now see, go high. Is this better?
Yeah. If you could tell what is happening, otherwise.
Yeah. So what happened is this. You can't hear it. Can you hear me?
The audio is not clear, so I was thinking if you could.
Okay, so what is happening in this video is we've done a little video on what is happening at the puja. Okay, it began at a temple auction and how it was there. When she came home, she saw 8 versions of puja. So how it went? They met 6 siblings, and then how it came across. The puja went on beyond. When we showed it to a weaver, he said, can't do it. So from the point of can't do, he continued the little bits as I showed you, where we could do it. So this is literally what I spoke about as a step-by-step, where you see me measuring it, where you see people wearing it, So how the journey was, it was like, she was found at a temple auction, came to us. There she found 7 siblings of hers, then was excited that each one was different. And, because each one was given to the production of the 7 pieces were taken up in different areas, which each zone in the village or area in that district thrived because of the variety. and how she thought nobody would take her up because the weaver said it was very difficult. So how we overcame it, showing you the measurements and the structure of it, slowly came to be a piece that everyone owns and wears. So in a nutshell, that was what the video was, saying that give every other sari a chance like the puja. Because if we do give a chance to other designs, so many more people could wear it and look beautiful, and so many more weavers could weave it. That is it. Can you hear me? Stop. Sorry, you still couldn't hear?
No, the volume was not clear today. Anyway,
What I spoke, you couldn't hear?
Yeah, that was clear.
Okay, fine. That's all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
for showing. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pavitra. Thank you so much for the lovely presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
For joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.